Hey guys, welcome to the start of term 4. The goal for this particular week is to cover the first two sections of these three ways to solve a quadratic equation. So today we'll do the first section. Thursday's video will be the second section, and then of course we'll start with the quadratic formula on Monday of next week. So anyway, excuse me. As it says, there are three ways to solve a quadratic equation: extracting square roots, factoring, or the quadratic formula. Now, extracting the square is actually the most straightforward. It only works if you have an x squared term and no regular x term. If you have a regular x term, you cannot use the extracting the square. But if you have an x squared term and like a whole number, like in problem number 1 here where it says x squared equals 16, then that's very straightforward. It's 4 steps, and sometimes you can skip a couple of them. First thing you have to do is get the x squared term alone. Then you have to take the square root of both sides. Don't forget the plus and minus. Whenever you take the square root of both sides, you take the plus and minus, and then you solve it. So for number 1, x squared equals 16. Get the x squared term alone. Done. Take the square root of both sides. Okay, the square root of x squared is x. See if I have my pen that's writing. Nope, that's my empty pen. I'll use a pencil. Alright, so square root of x squared is x equals plus and minus the square root of 16. Well, guys, I hope you know what the square root of 16 is. 4. So your answer is just simply x equals 4 and x equals negative 4. Now that's a very simplified one. Let's go ahead and move along to like something a little bit tougher, like number 3. Number 3, you have 2x squared minus 40 equals negative 90. Again, the first thing you want to do is get the x squared term alone. Well, in order to do that, I have to add 40 to both sides. So I have 2x squared. Now, negative 90 plus 40. Use your calculator if you're not sure, but it is negative 50. I still don't have the x squared by itself yet, do I? What do I need to do? I need to divide by 2. Okay, then I now have x squared all by itself. Now, this doesn't have to be x. It could be y, it could be a, it could be b, whatever the variable is. Whatever the squared variable is, that's what you need to get by itself. Now, negative 50 divided by 2, well, that's negative 25, right? Okay, so now we have to take the square root of that. Well, we get x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 25. And guys, guess what? This is going to be an imaginary number. Why is it going to be imaginary? Because I've got a negative root here. So x equals plus or minus 5i. So x equals 5i and x equals negative 5i. And that's it. That's all there really is to it. Let's do a couple more problems. Number 8, we have 6x squared plus 56 equals 88. So we're going to isolate the x squared. So we've got minus 56, minus 56. We've got 6x squared equals 32. Now what? Well, we divide by 6. We have x squared equals 32 over 6. Now let's simplify this. What goes into both 32 and 6? Okay, well, I can reduce that a little bit. X squared equals 16 over 3. Now, that's all I can do as far as that goes. So now let's go ahead and do our next step. Take the square root of both sides. So I get x equals plus or minus the square root of 16 over the square root of 3. Well, as you know, we can take the square root of 16, so we get x equals plus or minus 4 over the square root of 3. But if you remember from earlier, what do we not like to have? We don't like to have those square roots of 3, so how do we get rid of it? It's just the same way we get rid of I, it's the same way we get rid of anything. We multiply by 1, but it's the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. So I get x equals plus or minus 4 square root of 3 over 3. In other words, I get x equals 4 square roots of 3 over 3, and I get x equals negative 4 square roots of 3 over 3. Okay. So ladies and gentlemen, please try not to make these too difficult. Okay? Let's take a look at number 9, and then we'll step it up just a little bit with something a little bit harder. So we've got 2x squared plus 39 equals negative 12. Well, we're going to subtract 39 first. So I have 2x squared equals what? What is negative 12 minus 39? Well, that's negative 51. Okay. So now what? Now we divide by 2. And I get x squared equals negative 51 over 2. Well, what's the square root of that? We now have x equals plus or minus the square root of negative 51 over the square root of 2. There is no perfect square that goes into 51, so we're going to leave that alone, but we're going to pull out the I. So x equals plus or minus I root 51 over the square root of 2. Again, we don't like radicals in the bottom, so what do? Square root of 2 over the square root of 2. So now what do we have? X equals I square root of 102 divided by 2. And that's it. Nothing else you can do. That's plus or minus, of course. Okay, now what if we have like something like an x minus 5 squared? Okay, well we can still do the same thing. Okay, let's go over here to number 10, which is a little bit more straightforward. X minus 12 squared equals 16. The x squared, or the parenthesis, is all by itself already. So that all we can do is take the square root of that. Well, that gives me x minus 12 equals plus or minus the square root of 16. So I have x minus 12 equals plus or minus 4. So here's where you have to be careful. We want x by itself, so we're going to add 12. And we're going to add 12 in front of the plus or minus sign. So we get x equals 12 plus or minus 4. So the first thing we get is x equals 12 plus 4. And then we also get x equals 12 minus 4. If you try to add the 12 after the plus or minus sign, you're going to mess up. So whatever you take from the left-hand side, move it to the right. Always put it in front of the plus and minus. All right, so what's 12 plus 4, guys? Well, x equals 16. And then 12 minus 4, x equals 8. Okay. How about something like number 11? Again, we're going to start by taking the square root of both sides, so we get x minus 5 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 25. Or x minus 5 equals plus or minus 5i. So what do? I add 5 to both sides, and again, in front of the plus and minus. X equals 5 plus or minus 5i. I cannot add these separately, as you know, because this is an imaginary number and this is a real number. So my answer is just simply what I see right there. I have x equals 5 plus 5i, and I have x equals 5 minus 5i. And that's it. Let's take a look at 2 more problems for today, and then tomorrow we'll get you to do some work on your own. Of course, any of these problems that we didn't do together today, you are certainly welcome to work out on your own. So let's take a look at number 15. Here I have 2x minus 9 squared, but that's not by itself yet. So let's go ahead and make it by itself by subtracting the 64. So I end up with 2x minus 9 squared equals negative 40. What do? I take the square root. So 2x minus 9 equals plus or minus the square root of negative 40. Well, I still end up with 2x minus 9. And I'm going to simplify this a little bit. The square root of negative 40, that's 2I root 10. Hopefully y'all remember how to do that. Then we're going to add 9. Where are we going to add it? In front of the plus or minus. So I have 2x equals 9 plus or minus 2I root 10. Then to solve for x, I just simply divide by 2. Everything gets divided by 2. So I get x equals 9 halves plus or minus I root 10. And there you go. What about something weird like number 17? Well, that's not too bad. We got x plus 5 equals 3x minus 10. What do? I take the square root of both sides. X plus 5 equals plus or minus 3x minus 10. You've got to have that plus or minus in there. If you don't have the plus or minus in there, you're going to mess it up. So I end up with, so we're going to subtract 5 from both sides. So I'm going to have x equals negative 5 plus or minus 3x minus 10. All right, so what do I do with this? Well, I've got x equals negative 5 plus 3x minus 10. And I also have x equals negative 5 minus 3x minus 10. Well, here, let's go ahead and solve this. I have x equals negative 5 minus 10 is negative 15 plus 3x. So we need to move this x over here, so we're going to subtract 3x. So I end up with negative 2x equals negative 15, or x equals 15 over 2. And then I have to worry about this one over here. In this case, since I have x equals negative 5 minus 3x, now it's plus 10 because I have to distribute. And again, guys, if you're not understanding, stop and rewind and listen to it again, okay? So I'm going to add 3x. So I get 4x equals 5, or x equals 5 over 4. So these are the two numbers that should make this true. Okay, I'll leave that check up to you. All right, guys, relatively short video today. Again, whatever problems that we didn't do, please feel free to do them for yourselves to get yourself more practice before you get your homework tomorrow. Thanks.